be reviewing Yay by Kanye West. This is the first album from Kanye West that I ever listened to in its entirety. It was released on June 1st, 2018, and I heard it right around that time when it was released. So before then, I hadn't really been exposed to his music beyond like his hits, like Gold Digger, obviously I knew, but I didn't really have a preconception of this is what Kanye West normally sounds like. So the first few times I listened through, I noticed how well the tracks really flow into each other. It's so much that I was like not sure where one track ended and another began in every case. And I think that's overall a really good quality to have. This album is also only 23 minutes long, which makes it suitable to listen to it in its entirety often. And I think this album really makes the most of the short duration and just kind of hits you with all the punches in each track. So it's a lot of complexity in a brief time. It just sounds like a really big sound in a small and perfect little package. Peter bought this album from Barnes & Noble's with me in December 2019. We were visiting each other while I was still at school, and we have listened to it many times since then. The photo on the album cover was taken by Kanye on his iPhone on the way to the listening party before the album was released, just a few hours before. And the album was recorded entirely in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, so right beside this beautiful mountain range called the Teton Range, which is what is featured in this photo on the album artwork. Kanye basically decided to start a project which has been called the Wyoming Sessions, that's understood by many to at least partially be influenced by his mental health at the time, and was somewhat of an attempt to reconnect and enjoy like some seclusion, be in nature and away from the public eye as he was dealing with different personal issues. He actually bought a property there in Wyoming and used it for the recording studio, and he named it West Lake Ranch. It had previously been called Monster Lake Ranch. Pretty uncreative name, sounds a bit clunky. I think he really could have done better than that, but I don't think that's too important to the album itself. On April 19th, Kanye went on The Breakfast Club and announced that this album was planned to be released June 1st, 2018, and would have just 7 tracks, which it does. And then 11 days later, on April 28th, Kanye tweeted this image of a text conversation between him and Wes Lang, who is an LA-based artist who previously worked with Kanye in 2013 when Kanye licensed images from Wes Lang for his Yeezus tour. So in the text conversation, Kanye is sending this photo of a man named Jan Adams, who is the plastic surgeon who operated on Kanye's mother, Donda West, just a day before she unfortunately passed away, her death being caused by some complications from that surgery. So Kanye is letting Wes know that he's going to feature Jan on the album cover in this text conversation, and he's trying to get ideas for like what to name the album, and Wes Lang responds and suggests "Love Everyone," all caps in italics like this, and Kanye responds that he loves that name. So just a little over a month before the album's released, it has a completely different name, completely different artwork, and actually a completely different sound, because later on Kim Kardashian let the world know that Kanye basically rewrote this entire album in the 2 weeks before it was released, at least partially because of the controversial comments he made on TMZ, of course, saying that slavery was a choice black people made, and the fallout that occurred from that. So we know why the music was reworked, and additionally, Kanye had to abandon his idea for the artwork with Jan Adams because 2 days after he announced the news via Twitter, the plastic surgeon responded with an open letter asking Kanye to cease and desist from using his photo to promote any of his work. So that was nixed almost immediately. And I think this backstory adds clarity to why it seems like Kanye maybe didn't put a lot of care into the artwork, so that really isn't the whole truth. Even though the image was kind of last minute, he ultimately selected a really beautiful photo that has a really great deal of relevance to the album, considering it was completely made while Kanye looked at these very mountains. So I think it works well. As far as the text Kanye puts over it, he writes, "I hate being bipolar, it's awesome." Maybe it's partially because of the lines of writing are slanted and just kind of like a bit of like a trying too hard to be like cool vibe, but it makes me feel like a little bit of If you're reading this, It's Too Late's cover and the text on there just kind of reminiscent of that to me. But overall, I actually really commend Kanye for his decision to be transparent about his mental health. I don't think there's a right or wrong way for him to feel about being a person with bipolar disorder. Like I said, part of me does feel like he's trying to come across as a bit edgy or like say something a bit unexpected here, because that's kind of seemingly fitting with like his tendency to live outside of basically people's normal expectations for him and to kind of push at their comfort zones of what they deem as acceptable. And I kind of get that vibe from the statement on this cover, but either way, starting an honest and open conversation about mental health is a positive aspect of this album, in my opinion, and it's actually returned to in the second song of the album, Yikes, that we'll talk about then. Overall, Ye was the second of 5 albums that Kanye executive produced, and provided guest vocals on in the Wyoming sessions. The other 4 albums in order of release were Pusha T's third studio album, Daytona, Kid See Ghost by West and Kid Cudi, their first debut. Nas released his 11th studio album, Nasir, and finally Tiana Taylor released her second studio album, KTSE, on June 23rd, 2018 to close out the project. I really enjoy this album. It always boosts my mood. There are several lines that I'll highlight as I go through the track, one by one, that just strike me as really brilliant. But like I said, I never really listened to Kanye before this, and this made me start to be way more interested in his music and hip-hop and rap as genres, and getting me into all of the many influences Kanye is able to tie together in each and every one of his albums. It always leads you down interesting paths musically. This is one of my favorite albums, and I imagine I'm going to continue to enjoy it for the rest of my life. The first song on the album, I really hate the beginning of this song, not so much for like what Kanye says. I actually find that to be kind of funny and clever. But like the transformations on his voice sound incredibly cheesy and ruin the intro for me. So this song called I Thought About Killing You, for example, he says, but sometimes I think really bad things, really bad things. And the audio just goes deeper and deeper in pitch on like every really, so he's like really bad, really bad things. And it just sounds really, I don't know, uncreative in my opinion. And it just continues on with these lines where we see the very first line ends really high-pitched, and then the second goes incredibly low-pitched, and then the third line goes even more low somehow. And it just doesn't quite feel interesting or clever enough to fit with the rest of the album. Maybe he was just trying to go for a kind of crazy, off-the-walls feeling, being that he is making this album a conversation all about mental health and the stigma and stereotype of mental health being that you're crazy and psychotic. But if so, I don't think that even comes off incredibly well. I realize album introductions are often interpreting musicality in some interesting and unusual ways, but I still think Kanye's interpretation here is pretty awkward and I just don't like it. Moving on past the introduction, I really do like I Thought About Killing You. There's just one verse that really nicely uses onomatopoeia that strikes you here. And these lines, I think, are really excellent, and together are all strong statements regarding Kanye's experience as a black man in America, with obviously the middle one adding maybe a hint of humor, but still a great example of Kanye's homonym usage. I also really like these lines. The way he shows how long a long ago, way back was, and then repeats that in the next line as well. Moving on to the next song, Yikes, I think the chorus is really strong. The way he says, it sounds like he's tripping over his words and kind of clenching his teeth, which is really fitting with the difficult theme of the song being drug addiction. I also really enjoy these lines that end the second verse, where Kanye is basically like pumping himself up, and you hear that both in his tone and the meaning of his words. And then in the outro, we have what are probably the most infamous lines of the album. That's my bipolar shit. What? That's my superpower. Ain't no disability. I'm a superhero. I'm a superhero. So like I promised, we're returning to the theme of mental health here, and regardless of what you may think of Kanye West, this feels like an extremely positive message. I would definitely acknowledge that many disabled people are extremely comfortable and in fact prefer to be called disabled because that is their identity, and it's their belief that there isn't anything wrong with them, is the world that's not built correctly, and they're absolutely correct. And maybe it's a bit easier to see when we consider a person with a physical disability. But even for someone like myself who struggles with mental illness, there's a lot of recognizable design in our society that was not built with everyone's needs in mind. So that being said, Kanye is at the end of the day not saying anything bad about disability, even if he himself doesn't identify with it. By contrasting his disability with superpower, perhaps he is speaking to his own very unique experience in which he has encountered or perhaps has been able to build a system that is indeed fit to his disabilities, making it a bit of a superpower, but that is likely not a relatable situation for listeners anywhere, to be fair. In the next song, All Mine, I love the first verse so much. He makes allusions to Kerry Washington, Naomi Campbell, and Stormy Daniels. And in fact, Kerry Washington was quoted saying that she really liked that Kanye added her to the canon of rap music. Then the next lines are a pretty funny play on words. One of the many links in this album to the Kardashian/Jenner empire. And then we immediately see another one with Tristan Thompson. So Kanye is making a lot of references to his family in this verse, and it's constantly changing the rhyming word to create a really interestingly complex poetry, in my opinion. We see clearly how masterfully Kanye can produce as the bass perfectly punctuates certain syllables in the end of this verse. Wouldn't Leave is all about Kanye's offensive Twitter comments and the blowout that's subsequently occurred, especially between him and his wife. Listening to it now, just recently after they've announced they are getting a divorce, it definitely gives a different context because, like, she did leave. But still, I think this song is about more than Kanye's personal relationship and speaks to a larger theme of the difficulties couples go through in general. And then also we see with these lines that Kanye is reflecting on the experience in terms of his own consciousness building, and it's basically saying he's thinking futuristically but sounding like someone who's just basically stuck in a segregationist mindset. Kanye's apparently a big fan of the Jetsons, so it's not that surprising that they get an allusion here, but I also think it kind of points out the lack of black people in popular science fiction TV shows, being that he references a white character. Obviously, there are many exceptions to this if you dig a bit deeper, or maybe consider a different form of media, like Octavia Butler's novels, but the point still stands. The last lines, I think, add another interesting perspective on this song, because it kind of again shows that the song isn't about Kim, like she didn't stick with him, and the song is maybe more so about the type of love he's looking for in life. No Mistakes is a song that I would call rooftop vibes. I love this song. The sample in the first verse is actually from a song I heard for the first time really recently when it came up on Shuffle. It's Slick Rick's 1988 song, Hey Young World. And in that song he's talking about that no matter where you are in life, it's always possible to turn things around. I don't think I have too much to say about No Mistakes, but I do really like it, like I said. It's just a really good example of Kanye's lyricism and a very fun and happy neo-soul feel, using that sample really well. And obviously making the connection back to the message of the original song in his work. Ghost Town is my favorite song in this album. It immediately brings you in with a strong feeling of sentimentality, courtesy of the Shirley Ann Lee sample, which is just gorgeous. What's interesting is that although the recording is from the late 1960s, it was just released to the public in 2012, and this was actually the very first release from this artist. So the album is called Songs of Light and was made by compiling various segments that they had previously recorded during the Shirley Ann Lee radio hour in the 60s. So no other studio recordings from this incredible singer were ever released, and I love that Kanye does the work here of giving awareness to a black woman who history has intentionally tried to erase. I really like in the first verse how Party Next Door kind of muddles his words on Sunday and someday, and they don't sound all that different. And it's interesting to think about the lines with those words being almost interchangeable. And then on these two lines in particular, I really love how the production builds and then it like waterfalls, or maybe you can think of it as a cascade with Kanye's voice. It's really beautiful. Additionally, even if Kid Cudi isn't the greatest singer, there's a lot of emotion and passion in the chorus. And then we get to the best part of the song, the outro. I love it, honestly. It starts out adding in many layers, and the drums sound like a big celebratory shout. And then the transition into the next song, the last song of the album, goes into an intro with the same vocalist, 070 Shake, who was just 21 when this album came out, which I think is really cool. I think all of the song transitions on this album are pretty well done, like I mentioned before, but this last transition is by far the best. 070 Shake is also featured in the chorus on Violent Crimes, the last song. And again, find her voice really beautiful and full of imagery. And she says, reality is upon us, colors dripping off, colors dripping off. It just sounds like liquid dripping, like droplets. I do really like Kanye's verse in this for a lot of reasons. The subject matter is probably not one of them. Like in this song, Kanye is primarily talking to his daughter, saying how worried he is that she's going to end up with the type of man that he was before she was born. Many people are concerned with their child ending up with a bad partner, so I do think it's a relatable message, and like I can see my dad feeling a similar way towards me. But Kanye's take on it is so sexualized and kind of weird. He seems to be forgetting that in the end it's his daughter's voice that should matter the most in all of it. Regardless of the uninspired bout of masculinity the song definitely holds, I do think Kanye is getting at a really interesting place emotionally. Especially in the last line of the verse that he repeats twice. He sounds like he's falling apart and breaking down a bit. He's kind of exhausted and realizes that he repeated a tale as old as time. He was a bad guy until he had a daughter of his own and then realized his mistakes. He's just very tired thinking about that cycle. Since listening to Ye lots, I have started to branch out more into Kanye's other earlier music, and always will love that this is the album that got me into Kanye. I recommend this album for anyone who wants a short but dynamic experience that is thought-provoking, if nothing else, and provides a perfect melding of a warm sentimentality and a shining feeling of the future. My favorite tracks on Ye were All Mine, No Mistakes, Ghost Town, and Violent Crimes.
Hi, this is Peter with the Media Room. If you liked Kathleen's review of Ye by Kanye West, check out my review of Mario Superstar Baseball for the Nintendo GameCube.